All right, welcome back to our Real Deal Investing podcast. I'm Larry Mastropieri and my co-host Jerron Kelley. We're joined by Dan DeMott, who has a very interesting history, and we love connecting and chatting with him about all these types of things that he's got going on. So we'll get right into it. Dan, nice to see you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks
Welcome.
for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your history.
Sure. So I'm a South Florida native, husband and father to two little girls here in Boynton Beach area.
I don't think I knew you were a fellow native. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, originally born down in Hollywood.
Okay, nice.
And Miramar and grew up there, and then came up here to Boynton Beach for
very cool
through high school and everything.
And you're a native too, right?
I am. What high school did you go to here?
Atlantic High School.
Okay, cool. You were a fellow IB guy. I was Suncoast, so yeah, magnet school. Anyways, for all you people who don't care about that, we're bromancing here.
Exactly.
So, moving on.
Grew up down here. Have stayed here the whole time. Went to FAU for college. Got a degree in real estate. I've always been in real estate. My mom and my aunt were in real estate. I always tell people, this is kind of a funny story. I don't think I've actually ever told this on a podcast or anything before. My first job in real estate I was like 11 years old, and at the time, my aunt was doing a lot of HUD deals, like HUD foreclosures back then. And we used to print up a flyer on a word processor of all the HUD listings that were available for sale. And my job was to run in and stick them in Homes and Land magazine, racks in Publix. And so Homes and Land probably didn't love that, but that was my first real estate gig. Was like, we got to get this marketing material out, right? And so I'd run around to every Publix.
I think that's called guerrilla marketing or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
We were ahead of the time.
Or scamming. I don't know. One or the other. Yeah. That's awesome.
Were you like sliding them in each?
No, I would just run in Publix and just like stick a stack of them in the front.
Okay, on the stand or whatever. Okay, cool.
But my aunt's been in real estate here in South Florida for 35 plus years, and her and my mom worked in that. And so I always sort of grew up around it. Got a degree in real estate, got my license when I turned 18. Didn't do very much with it. I was going to college and having a great time, and was really fortunate to get an internship that turned into a career in real estate private equity here in Delray. Did that for 8 years, and then sort of been like an entrepreneurial journey through the real estate world. Did property management, which Jerron, that's how you and I
that's how we met. Yeah, you built up a nice little property management company.
Yeah, built up our first property management company called Rent Pro, and sold that after about 4 years of running that, and then transitioned into real estate sales. Which is how Larry, you and I met. Yeah, built up a large team here in Palm Beach County, and
you helped find me a couple investment proproperties early on. Yeah,
and
you're a great realtor too.
We did that. We sold a lot of real estate, and then I transitioned into running brokerage for Keller Williams here in Boynton Beach, and so it's sort of been this evolution in the real estate industry. That's sort of my background. I've touched a lot of different aspects. I've invested personally. I've raised money and put deals together, fix and flip, long-term rentals, and now I still do real estate sales, but my primary focus is coaching real estate agents.
Okay. I don't think many people appreciate like the first gig you had. It's not easy to get into that role that you got into right out of school.
I was really, really, really fortunate.
That's kind of like the opposite. Normally you start off by doing something like, selling real estate or whatever, and then maybe graduate later on as you gain more knowledge into a company like that.
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. A great guy who I'm still close with, Brett Foreman here in Delray Beach, Foreman Capital. I was working at a gym at the time, and so I would open the gym 4:30 in the morning, and I thought it was the greatest job ever because I'd show up, barely anybody came in. I would do schoolwork. I was going to college at the time. I was done with work at 11. I'd gotten all my schoolwork done. Would go to FAU, knock out a couple classes, done for the day by 2:00. Like I thought I had the world all together. And Brett worked out in the morning, and one day he came up to me and he said, you're always here. The gym always looks good. You're always doing some work. What are you studying? I said, real estate. He said, well, I do real estate investing. If you're interested, come check it out. And so to his eternally grateful for him giving me that opportunity. It started as an internship, and I was there for 8 years, and ended up being the vice president of the company. And we invested over $450 million in commercial real estate.
Incredible.
Over that period of time.
What year was that?
So would have been starting in 2006.
Okay.
For 8 years,
and going,
So just right before the crash.
Right before the crash, right?
And then through it and the recovery. Yeah, you were there.
Which was an amazing, amazing experience. Like, great place to be on the front line. We spent time, we raised money and invested in distressed debt at that time, right? Which was big. A lot of the local banks were offloading stuff. So we did that. We invested heavily for 2 years in tax lien certificates here in Florida. Because again, we were through that period of, for those that lived through 2008, 2009, you had to reinvent yourself. Like, the market was all over the place. Then as the world stabilized, we got back into, our primary business was, opportunistic debt investments. So think commercial hard money for someone there. And
meaning he would be the lender on commercial hard money deals?
Yeah.
Okay. Bailouts or
exactly. All kinds of different situational
deals,
right? Exactly. Whether they were value add or the principals were going some kind of personal financial difficulty or something like that. So we did a lot of that business. There's a great market for that. And
would he also do flips as well? Your company?
We didn't do a lot of flips. Like, it was mostly commercial.
Got it.
And
debt related.
And debt related. Right. So we raised money from a lot of high net worth individuals and institutional capital partners, and then we would originate and invest in these debt deals.
Okay. Were there a lot of defaults on those mortgages at the time?
So interesting. Yeah. And overall, the portfolio did extremely well. Right. We were very conservative in the underwriting process.
Got it.
But in 2008, 2009, no one got out unscathed. So, we had some.
There were some.
And worked them, which for me was an amazing experience to be there for that part as well.
Sure.
And learn what's the process of foreclosure and bankruptcy. And, I always tell people I got as close as I'll ever get to a law degree by proxy of hiring hiring fantastic attorneys in the foreclosure and bankruptcy and real estate law practice. So it was an amazing experience for me. And like I said, as the market came back, we built the business back up. And I just reached a point where I'd gotten married. We were going to start a family. We wanted a different lifestyle. That type of business involves a lot of travel. And I wanted to be more entrepreneurial. I learned a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
Forever eternally grateful for that opportunity. But I was ready for the next challenge.
That's like the best education you can get, right?
Yep.
In that space. That's pretty cool.
And you had a very similar thing, Larry, with your background in engineering.
And unfortunately, my business partner is who I invest with is in private equity. So I got by proxy the education of a Blackstone investor on some level, right?
Sure.
And so, or at least the fundamental decision-making paradigm, right? So that's it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah. It's just the exposure to see how those deals are structured and how investors look at them at different levels. And the thing I loved about that business is we had institutional partners, right? We had hedge funds in Manhattan who would invest with us, and then we had just high net worth individuals. And so you got to see this range of people, how people looked at things, what type of analysis they were doing, what their concerns were when it came to cost of capital or turnover or different things.
And then you were boots on the ground and you had local expertise, which is like the final piece to the puzzle, right? And you saw probably the transition of Delray Beach downtown as an example, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, or Lake Worth or everything that's changed here in South Florida over the past 20 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
25 years.
But I do see it as two big pieces of the puzzle. Or I don't know what you say, it's almost like maybe like a Venn diagram that overlaps with each other. But there's one part of it which is learning to be an investor, and we've all invested in investment properties, or you all are brokers, so you have sold many of these properties to investors and been around this, and you know the numbers. I know, Dan, you've done presentations in front of investment clubs. You're a very polished guy. You're very intelligent. You know how to show your cap rates and your debt service coverage ratios and all the numbers. You know how to put all that together. But you could do that personally, like I do for my own investments. But taking it to the next step of doing it for others and bringing in investment partners and bringing in outside money, especially this high net worth money and the very sophisticated money from, let's say, New York or, San Francisco or whatever it is, you really have to know your stuff and you have to build that trust level up. And that's where those two worlds meet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the interesting thing I always tell anyone looking to get started in investing, or agents who are trying to figure out how to get into the investment space, money is never the problem, right?
It's the deal.
It's the deal.
It's the deal.
Like there is more money looking for opportunities than there are opportunities. And and I think, we kind of went down this rabbit hole with the idea of, my growth path was sort of inverse of what most people look to get, right? It was being there and getting to see firsthand that money is not an issue, that if you have a good opportunity, there's money for it. That I think really put me in position to be really successful in the property management and the real estate and all that more entrepreneurial stuff, because you realize, okay, the energy needs to be focused on finding the opportunity. And if you find opportunities, you'll always find investment partners.
And that just goes back to that local expertise comment that I made. Like it's, for me, that's like, and you're looking for deals all the time, right? We're all looking for deals, and it's just like, it's very, very difficult in this competitive space.
Well, especially in this environment and competitive, and especially here in South Florida, so much money has flowed in and so many people have moved here with expertise and their expertise in all these sophisticated areas of the country. They're bringing their tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars here to invest. So it's especially hyper competitive.
Especially over the past couple of years, that's one of the things you learn with when you start raising capital from a diverse group is the concerns are different, right? So everyone's expectations, their return expectations are different because where their money is now
cost of capital
is different, their cost of capital is different, and other non-financial concerns, right? In South Florida, I always think is like the perfect, ground zero for that, because we've got people coming in internationally who would accept a loss. Right, because it's a smaller loss than they would get if that money stayed in
with inflation in Argentina or Brazil or wherever, Colombia
or Turkey or other places. There are
absolutely
there are countries,
they just want stable currency.
They want stability. They want stability, right? And I've sold properties to a lot of Turkish investors who said, I've had bank accounts confiscated. It's your bank account one day, it's the government's bank account the next day.
Well, on that, not to interrupt, but I have a lot of Turkish investors, and they have to go to the bank to export currency to get their money and the dollars. They have to show a settlement statement. They have to show the details of the deal. And then it takes days, maybe weeks even, of approval with the bank in order to approve to get their own money out of the country, because they're the Turkish government is locking their money in there, and it's pretty scary stuff. But yes, back to your point.
So you've got people with all these kind of other incentives who by a factor of Miami being an international hub, are bringing their capital here. Then you've got, like you said, people relocating from all across the country, especially post-COVID with, different political things and tax implications and everything else. So all of those other factors make Florida such a dynamic place to try to find investment property, because there are people who will accept a 0 or a negative rate of return, which isn't how typically investors look at things, but their other concerns are worth it. Super notably recently was, Jeff Bezos, the news about Jeff Bezos, that, by moving to Florida, he saved $610 million. Now in taxes, right? So at Jeff Bezos' level, that probably doesn't factor into our market. But when I read that, I think about how many business owners downstream of him will read that and say, you know what, we should relocate to Florida.
If he's doing it, why am I not doing this?
And he's doing it at $600 million. But for the average investor, business owner, who's looking at retiring at some point or selling out a business and having some kind of capital gains event, relocating to Florida, now they have this other incentive. It's like, well, I save $1 million in taxes by moving to Florida, so I don't mind overpaying for something here.
Well, a couple other things too. I mean, stability of government and courts, not getting political at all, but this podcast will be released probably a month and a half from now, but we just had news that, Trump got hit for 300 and whatever it is, $50 million of a judgment. Love him or hate him. I don't care if you're a rabid Democrat or rabid Republican. that doesn't bode well for the state of New York for business people that want to invest there. And there's been several big business people, the guy from Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful, or Kevin O'Leary, who said, I'm never going to invest anything there again in New York. I mean, I've seen a number of these people. It's just Florida is a stable state. It's got stable government, stable courts, nothing wild going on here. You know, the rule of law prevails here in Florida. And I think people are seeing that. And it's just, we're just more and more people are moving here with a lot of money. And the other thing too is that I truly believe that, yes, will people... If I found some amazing deal in, let's say, Indianapolis, Indiana, and someone was running the deal and I really trusted them, would I put some of my capital in the deal? I would. Sure. I would. But I'm much more likely to put my money here in a deal that maybe has a little less of a return just because it's local, because it's in Florida, and I know that there's growth here in the future. And there's going to, again, I'm not concerned about where we're at right now. I'm thinking 10 and 20 years ahead, towards my retirement. And I know that I don't see anything in the future for Florida where things are going to fly off the rails. Yeah.
And there's still great, and there is still great opportunity, right? It's, as we all know, having found opportunities for ourselves or for our clients, you have to be patient, you have to be diligent, you have to look where other people aren't looking. And
you have to be willing to do some more difficult things too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you can still find great deals. I know. I tell people all the time, if I look back at my personal investments that I've made in real estate in South Florida, to most people's surprise, most of them have come off the multiple listing service. Right? They've been on the market. They were overlooked. They were more complicated than most people were willing to deal with. No one was willing to go in there and really make offers or get creative. And I've been able to put great deals together that were openly advertised. And then by the same token, I've been able to go find off-market opportunities, that made a lot of sense.
People come to me a lot and they say things like, I want to buy a foreclosure or I want to buy something off market. And I'm like, well, why? Oh, because I want a good deal. I'm like, okay, so you want a good deal or you want to do a deal, right? Okay,
always where it starts. They bring it all the time. I want a foreclosure. Let me know. Or auction properties. Can you educate me on auctions? I'm like,
man, how many people ask you that question?
And I tell them, I say, I have been a real estate, I've been an attorney for 20 some years and I've owned a real estate law firm for 14 years. I deal with foreclosures and evictions, and I wouldn't even invest in auction properties. Like, you have to, that is a niche that you have to spend years learning, and you'll lose on a lot of deals before you start winning.
You have to do it at scale, so that way you lose some, you win some, and it balances out.
The other thing is, I think people have, I like, Larry, how you phrased it, which is you go back to, well, you want a deal. What do you really want? Which you really want a deal. And then you're a great real estate agent, and that's why you can get people in that conversation, because that conversation goes to, well, how do you define a deal? Exactly. What's your cost of capital? What are your return expectations? How much risk are you willing to take? These are all the factors that actually go into that. And people go after foreclosures under a false perception, right? Which is that there's inherently distress there that creates opportunity. Mm-hmm. And it's not true.
Not
especially in a very competitive market down here, like, it's not necessarily true. And when somebody says foreclosure to me, I'm usually like, you don't know what you're talking about, probably, because if you came to me and said, I want to buy auction properties, okay, very different. Okay, if you said, I want to buy tax deeds, or I want to buy, there's all these different
sheriff's auctions, or there's all, and so many of the foreclosures that they're talking about are really REO properties. Essentially, after the foreclosure occurs at the auction, the bank buys the property and then they go and list it. And so it's on the MLS anyways. Yeah, is it a foreclosure? Of course, it's a foreclosure, but it's being marketed like any other property. So there's no additional value there. Right. In fact, it's just a harder deal because now you have to deal with the bank's stupid contracts. And Larry and I went through this. He found us a foreclosure property. We did well on it, but it wasn't. We didn't do well because it was a foreclosure property. Right. We did well because it was a disaster of a property with mold, and we were willing to come in and rip out walls and do a lot of things and put $85,000 up for an association membership that a lot of people either A, didn't have the money, or B, were worried that they would never get that back.
That deal's a great example because I was running around showing property to a guy who who is very well versed in renovation and all this stuff, but he's new to South Florida, and he was running around and he wanted something like that. And so I hunted it down, found it, brought him to it, and he was like, no way, right? Well, he looked and he was like, okay, this is a mess, but let's see how let's try to do the deal. And then they presented all the contracts. And then he was like, no, this is way too risky, right? And this is an REO property, which is inherently the least risky of the foreclosure list of.
Because you can actually do some due diligence and you can get into the property and you can see it. Because if you're buying an auction property, you're never getting in that property prior to buying it. You're buying it sight unseen.
You're not even getting real title. You're getting a certificate of title, right? Like you just go down the list of problems.
There could be so many issues on title that you have to clean up and spend money on, and could be 200,000 in code violations that you now have to go and mitigate. And
and it comes from that false perception that because it's at foreclosure, it's a deal.
Yeah,
right. That's it. And that every day or every month that there's just deals being sold out to people, and you could just show up like you go to Amazon and pick one up. It just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
Now there are people who do it, but I would just make the case that it's no better than any other way you can find deals. And like everything, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have a learning curve. You're going to have to invest the time to learn how to do it at a really high level.
This is what I start telling, because I get these calls all the time as a broker, right? And so like I just get the calls like, I want to be an investor. I want to invest here. I'm like, okay, are you committed to this? Because this is hard.
Yeah.
This is really hard. I'm a full-time investor and broker. This is all I do every single day. And I'm telling you, this is really freaking hard to do. And you need to be committed to doing this. And if you're going to do this just like a once-off, willy-nilly, like I thought about this last night, I want to buy a condo and invest. It's like, well, why? Because you want a return on your money? I don't know if I'm pessimistic. I tell people this all the time, and then some of them don't call me back because it's just like, I'm just like not telling them what they want to hear, which is like, yeah, let's buy a property and let's invest and let's make money. Like most of the time you're not making money in like most of these deals.
Yeah.
So
and are finding deals and you're spinning your wheels and then you end up doing nothing. For those types of people that maybe have 200,000 and they want to do something with it, invest in real estate, going back to your original job, better to be a private lender. So we know brokers that they need this money. So if anyone out there has 200,000, they want to invest in real estate, I'll put you in touch with someone that will lend your money out, secured by a mortgage. You'll get 10, 11, 12% per year, way above your returns on T-bills of 5%, and it'll be secured and you'll get your money back and you're going to make a nice return on your money. And you're not going to have to go out there and scour for deals and hit up wholesalers and go look at 20 properties before you even find one. And then it's a stinker and, you get hit by code violations and whatever. You know.
I mean,
it's
it's
the grind. It's a grind.
And what people really want is that. I think that's a great point, Jerron. People want to be a passive investor.
Yeah.
Everyone wants passive income and they want to be an investor. Well, an investor
by easy money.
An investor by definition is that you're letting your capital do the work for you, right? You're not going out and doing the work. Finding investment property is a proactive business. And it's going to take time and it's going to take energy. I did the same thing, Larry, when I've sold a lot of what I call sort of like starter investments, 2 to 4 unit, multifamily, which are great. You can get great deals and they're a great way to get started. But I tell everyone who comes to me and says, I want to get started, I go, here's all the properties that are available. Pick 15, any 15, and go look at them.
Yeah.
Because if someone's not willing to make that kind of time investment, they'll never know a good deal from a bad one anyways. Yeah. You have to go look at 15, 20 properties and develop a sense of this is what I like, this is what I don't like. These areas are good for me, these areas are not. This type of property.
Exactly.
There's so much nuance to it.
There's so much nuance. And so, but when I find people who are willing to do that, they end up becoming investors. And we've got a lot of great success stories because they go out and educate themselves, because that's the advantage that the three of us have. If someone gave us a deal right now, you could probably look at it in about 15 minutes and go, this is good or bad.
Per foot, per door, tell me the unit mix.
Yep.
And within I got a text this morning from a broker.
Right.
Because again, this is a proactive business. I'm talking to brokers, we're talking to wholesalers, we're talking to, these random people that are finding deals. We got cold callers, all these things that are happening. It's like you never know where a deal is going to come from, back to the point of like, foreclosure, right? It's not that, it's everything. But he texted me this morning, he was like $170 a door, $250 a foot, and I hit him back with, doesn't work. Yep. And he's like, here's the location. I'm like, it doesn't fit. Yep. So like,
but your ability to do that is a reflection of the hours and hours and
Thousands of hours.
thousands of hours and thousands of deals that you've looked at.
We've driven every street from Fort Lauderdale to West Palm, and now we're like in Fort Pierce, and like I probably tell you what a street looks like in Fort Pierce at this point. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing that when people are getting started, they don't fully appreciate. But but it's that's the path to do
That's
it.
what makes it hard for me, and even Jerron, I'm sure you too, to like be like, oh, there's this deal in the Carolinas. Like, let's go buy this, right?
Back to my Indiana example is, I mean, I guess if I really trusted someone and they showed a track record of this, and I have a hard time not flying there to go see a deal. And okay, I mean, if it's a high price deal with a high return, maybe I'd be willing to do that and spend a day and a half of my life going exploring that. But I just know from how many properties that I've gone to look at, and I say, no, Larry, many times I'm with you looking at deals, or I'm just driving by stuff, and it's no.
That flip we thought.
So I don't want to fly 4 hours or spend a day and a half to look at a property in 10 minutes and say no. You know,
there was a flip last week. You and I were both indirectly competing on or whatever, right? Whatever.
Well, and interested in it.
We both were interested in it. You went to the property. We were underwriting it at an ARV of $2.2 million, and they were trying to sell it for like 1.4 or something like that. And we all were assuming 2.2 because the math might have worked out. But you walked in
on paper.
Yeah.
On paper, it looked like it was a solid deal. It was 2-story, nice, needed complete rehab and gutting, which is fine. And, myself and the partner I work with on doing that stuff, happy to do that. But when you walk in, there's a stairwell like 3.5 feet in front of you that's awkward and weird and zigzaggy, and then the whole house is boxy. There's no way to open up any walls to make it open concept, which is the new thing right now. Everyone wants to have like open concept kitchen.
Ceiling 8 feet.
Ceilings upstairs and certain there was like a bedroom where it's like maybe 6 feet. I almost had to duck, and I'm 5'11". It was really weird.
It wasn't 2.2 million.
It wasn't. So, but I got excited because Larry looked at it first, and then he turned it down, and they called me and they said, Larry, has decided. He and I briefly spoke about it. He said, I've got a lot going on. I'm not sure if this is for me. And I hadn't had the chance to talk to him about why he turned it down. But I said, hey, on paper, this looks great. Let's go look at it. And it didn't work. But again, I could have flown to Indiana to look at a deal that I thought was exciting on paper to find out that this doesn't work, which gets back to my point of, I like being a local investor, and a lot of people do.
I think if you're going to be actively in the investment space, meaning you're going to go find the deals and oversee it, or partner with someone to oversee it and be actively involved, it's still a local business.
Yeah.
And if you want to go outside because you can't get the returns you're looking for or the risk profile in your geography, then you got to go find that partner, and you got to go find where you can just write the check and trust that they're going to get you the returns you need.
Yeah. Being local, also even when we're investing in Fort Pierce or other places, I can't get up there quick enough in some cases. I see some of these, it's interesting, they do a bit of like these auction deals at the house in Fort Pierce, which is kind of interesting. So I'm getting
old
these
school auction.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Okay. But I got to drive an hour and a half to go bid on this property that when I get up there, I'm not sure. And I may not even like time for that. Yeah. So I'm like half tempted now to start like sending my management over there and just be like, bid on this and buy this thing for me if it's right.
Well, show me some videos.
And also that's the great thing, right? That's the opportunity. The opportunity is if you're looking to get started or you don't have the capital, you can be the person who goes and does that. Like if you got time.
I could use a guy like that. Anybody wants to call me.
You've got to have, time, money, and skills to find investment property. I always tell people choose two.
Yeah.
You can have money and time and you can make up for skills, or you can have time and skills and you can make up for money.
There you go. That's very wise. Yeah.
But let's get back to your journey. So you told us about forming capital and then.
So after that, I like I said. Lifestyle change and just time to be more entrepreneurial. I started a property management business.
When was that? What year?
That was 2014. Yeah, 2014.
I love these podcasts because I get to learn more about people I know so well already.
You think you know him so well, and I didn't even know he's a Florida native. But 2014, cool.
So 2014, I started property management business.
From
scratch. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I had... this is probably a recurring theme. I think it's my personality, but I had just decided I'm going to be more entrepreneurial. I'm going to do this. I was fortunate to be in a financial position to be able to just do that.
We all kind of did that. You were working at a corporate firm. And I was working for General Electric.
I got fed up.
Yeah, we all kind of left and went on to the entrepreneurial thing.
And so at that time, I owned duplexes and triplexes. I'd been fortunate to just do some of my own investing. And I was sort of said, I'm managing these myself. I could probably turn this into a business. And I sort of thought about going back into residential sales because, like I said, I got the family connection. My mom and my aunt had the independent brokerage. But I wasn't ready to go there, coming from corporate and investing. And, I was like, am I going to be a real estate agent? Which, ends up coming back to be relevant to the story that I didn't want to be a real estate agent. But so I started the property management business. No clients other than I was my first client. And just hit the ground, hit the pavement, called for rent by owner signs, went and door knocked and found landlords to talk to, and went to networking events and real estate investment clubs and did presentations and built up a portfolio. So we went from, we grew extremely quickly. So it started in, I believe, October of 2014. And by the summer of 2015, we were managing 260 units.
It's crazy, crazy growth, crazy.
Yeah.
It takes some people a whole career to get to that.
Yeah. So we were 20
years.
3 counties. We were doing Palm Beach, Broward County, and then St. Lucie County. We were up in Fort Pierce as well. And so it was a ton of growth really quickly. I made my wife, she was a teacher. I made her, stop teaching and come help bail me out of the business, which she did an amazing job of. And so we, continued to operate it and had a great business there. That's where you and I met, Jerron. You helped me with plenty of evictions and landlord tenant issues. Yeah. We got more than a whole podcast worth of those stories.
Yeah, sure.
And then, again, sort of lifestyle change. And, I had accomplished it. My goal was, okay, can I build something myself? Can I
And then you had
scratch that entrepreneurial niche, right?
Yeah.
And my first daughter had been born, and my wife stepped out of the business to go be a mom, which was amazing. And it's just interesting how the world works. I had said at the beginning of the year, all right, I'm going to clean this up. We had some clients we didn't love. We had some properties we didn't love to manage. I was going to, tighten up the portfolio, get the operations cleaned up, and then sell it maybe after a year. And 60 days later, somebody called me and said, hey, would you ever think about selling that business? And I said, well, everything's for sale for a price kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And they gave me an offer, and it was more than I thought the business was worth. And so that's always the time to sell.
That was it. Wow.
And that was it. So we sold that business really quickly. And I had a non-compete from that. So that was when
How long was the non-compete?
A year.
A year, okay.
And so that's when I decided, maybe I'll just do some real estate sales. I was prohibited from doing management, but not from selling real estate.
Are you happy you sold it?
Yeah, that was my question.
Absolutely.
Looking back on it.
Yeah.
It's always the question for everyone to sell stuff. Yeah.
Yes. But it was interesting. Here's my response to that. Now, yes.
Okay.
And also the learning lesson that I took away from that was I regretted it the second the check cleared.
Yeah.
I put the money in the bank, and it's one of those like, hey, we sold the business, great, right? And
now what?
Well, it was one, you go,
but it's recurring cash flow every month, isn't it? That's nice.
It was, and it wasn't so much the cash flow, was I had built it.
Your baby.
And it also was one of those, it was also a big realization to go, it wasn't enough money. I wasn't retiring, right? Off of it. It was a nice amount of money, but it wasn't life-changing. And you go, okay, this is a different thought process, right? I had never thought about, well, what happens after you sell? Yeah. The goal is always, well, you build it and then you sell it. And then you go, okay, well, this isn't enough money. So now we have to do this again. Yeah. Now we have to do it bigger, right? And now we have to, figure out how to really
reinvent yourself. Yeah. You're reinventing yourself each time with each of these.
And that part I love, because to me, I have no ego around or attachment in the sense of I never thought I was the world's greatest property manager or anything like that. But it was a learning lesson. So now, yes, at that time, I was less sure.
Have you ever had thoughts to try to rebuild a property management business, or is that not?
I unintentionally ended up building up a second portfolio after that, and then unwound that because I found that,
Not for you.
It was anymore. Not the property management business was not for me. I'm great at getting the clients. I sold a lot of investment property, which then people said, well, can you manage this for me? And that's how I sort of ended up back into it. But we ended up the second time building up to about 100 units under management.
It's amazing.
And then I just unwound it. Yeah. I didn't even sell at that time. I just sort of found good referral partners.
Take
that
this
was
over.
like within the past few years, or?
Yeah. So that would have been,
because you were managing property when I met you.
So that would have been
the past 5 years.
2019. There you go. 2019 into 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a short period of time, a year or so, you build up 100 units, more or less.
Well, and again, my transition was, okay, let me get into real estate sales. Right. I had finally got to that point of being like, all right, I'm gonna do real estate sales.
Yeah.
And I started sort of saying, I've got this non-compete. I could sell real estate. How hard could that be? Right. And just sort of,
we can talk about that too.
Yeah. Just sort of putting some deals together, and then said, all right, this is a real business. I could really grow this, right? And that sort of got the spark again for me, is to go, okay, I can see how I can really scale this and build a big real estate sales business. And so then we sort of set down that path.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was 2018. 2018 was my first year hanging up a shingle as a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Sold about $4 million that first year.
Nice.
And then we basically doubled for each of the next 4 years.
Great.
So Larry, when you and I met, that was end of 2019, beginning of 2020, right? Yep, just before COVID.
Yep.
February 2020, Larry and I met. So 2019, I had sold 37 properties, like $9.5 million.
Wow.
And then 2020 was when I decided to build a team and really scale. We got up to $20 million, 84 properties. And the year after that, we did 34 million, 128 properties.
That's incredible. I didn't even know that you were getting to those stratospheric heights. Awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot
great.
of property sold.
That is a lot of property
so
sold.
we built that business really great. I had amazing team members.
Yeah.
And that was.
And you were under the Keller Williams brand at that time?
Yeah, at that time.
Before you took over the office, which we'll get to in a minute. But okay.
That's when Dan and I met, right as he was making the decision to move to KW. Actually, we kind of knew each other before that.
We had met on we met on the trip. So Keller Williams had flown a few people who were not Keller Williams agents out to one of their conferences. Okay. And Larry and I were both guests at that time, and we met there.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Before we leave the property management, because I kind of in my head, I like to kind of do it in time sequence. So the property management, you don't really, looking back on it, you don't regret it. You made your money. That's great. Are there any other lessons that you take from having a business like that, which is, very, I don't know, it's different than running a team or doing coaching now, but I don't know. Are there any positives or negatives? What were the challenges? What did you learn from that lesson being an owner?
So many lessons.
Yeah.
One, it was the start of how do you build a team for this, right? That you need a lot of different specialties and you need people.
Dan and I have talked at length about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Second thing, I think on a personal level, I learned when you get in the property management business, you really come face to face with how a very wide segment of the population lives, right? You're intimately involved in their day-to-day lives. Who's having children, who's going through loss, who's got jobs, who doesn't have jobs, who's getting, financial assistance and all kinds of other things. So that was really eye-opening. I think I probably learned more about being a good human from the property management business than I learned any business lessons.
I think it can either make you really jaded and hate human beings to your core, or you have to become much more empathetic and understanding and loving, and so you can go in one of two routes.
And I would argue it does. I would argue.
I don't know.
I would argue it goes through both, right?
Okay, maybe different stages.
Yes,
it's like grief and and anger. It's like the stage of loss and mourning.
You go through both.
And then coming out on the other side and being a better human, and loving people.
And the property management business is also tough. I think any management business is tough because you're trapped in the middle. Yeah. Right. You.
Between expectations of the owner,
and the
expectations of the
tenant, right? No one's ever happy in that in that dynamic.
It's a thankless business,
and you also have to abide by the law.
So and the law, right?
And
right. But you end up with a lot of situations where there were a lot of situations. I think ultimately it started to become the frustration that probably led me to just say, like, we got to be done with this. You end up in these situations where you go, I would do it differently, but it's not it's not my call to make, right? I can present the facts, I can make the case, but it's the landlord gets to decide, do they write the check or not write the check, and how to deal with the situation. And so I think that ultimately is like the biggest challenge of that business. It's also just from a business standpoint for anybody who wants to be in the property management business. It has an interesting scaling challenge, which was why I ultimately sold, which is when you're building it and you're staffing it, you staff at a level and then you can manage a certain number of properties and do a good job, right? And so then as the owner, you up to that level of revenue, you have fairly predictable profitability because you have the recurring revenue aspect. However, then you max out and you have to
get to the next level.
And so you have to go through this period where you have to staff in advance. And so now you're not making the money that you were or would like to, and you got to go back on the sales offensive. Sure. And every business has an element of that, but I think it's really challenging in the property management business because the stakes are so high and the number of people involved is so great that people won't suffer for poor service because you're scaling.
And part of it is that it's what I call like a commoditized business where it's like a commodity, meaning there's so many property managers out there that that you can't really charge more than 10% at the max. That's like your mom and pop customer that maybe has one or two properties. Maybe you can hit them for the 10%. But then from there, you have your more sophisticated clients that have 10 and 12 and 20 properties. You've got to lower your fees for those down to 8% or 7%. And then maybe the bigger portfolios, 30, 50, 100 units, you're doing at a flat fee, maybe $75 a door, $100 a door or something. So, and you're right. Like if your service slips a little bit, they'll just go somewhere else.
Yep.
Absolutely. And they're shopping you, and very few of them are probably going to call one property manager and be like, "Oh yes, 10%. Okay, absolutely. Here, take my business."
It's a bit of a relationship business too. Like for me, like I went through multiple property managers, and I eventually kind of hired a guy that didn't have experience at first, but had his brokerage license, and I knew his personality.
Sure.
And I knew him for a long time and had a trust element, and he said, yeah, I'll do this. So we built that business together. Jerron hired him. Jerron gave him a bunch of clients. I gave him a bunch of clients. Guy has 200 apartments that he manages now, or more than that, I think, 250, whatever. And he does it himself with some partners. But I know that this guy is going to do a good job because he's the guy touching everything. Yep. And his intention, at least as far as I know it, isn't to do what you discussed, which is like, all right, we're going to get to 2,000 apartments. I'm going to have like 10 guys, and Larry, you're going to be dealing directly with said guy that I just hired that actually doesn't
corporate. His intention is to be to have a nice second income because he's got another job, which we won't discuss on the side.
There's also with the property management, there's I think that it's very different skills to be able. There's two distinct skills in property management: turnarounds and stable operations, right? And that was one thing I learned about myself from that. I'm not a stable operations like I'm just not geared that way. It just
your sprints
excite me, right? Sprints, so I'd rather go hard. Jerron, you and I think one of the first times we connected was a property that I took over pretty early in the property management business. 30 units, and we ended up doing 26 evictions over the year. Right? I mean, I was on the first name basis with the sheriff, and
Had it sell.
Hey, Dan, we got an appointment on Friday.
I mean, we were
See you next Friday.
When's the next one? Yeah, see you next week. Got 2 or 3 next week.
And honestly, that was one of my favorites, right? Because I love that. When it comes, I love.
So you love the challenge. You love diving in.
I love the challenge. Yeah, it's something different every day. There's things always popping up. And you can see you're making progress. Like we took a property, and by the time you repaint it and you renovate the units, and you go from we're not collecting any rent to now we're collecting all the rent. That's great. And then and then it goes to a different phase, which is like, okay, well, we just sort of need to maintain this and don't let things slip, but also don't spend any money, and it becomes a different game. And I think it's a different personality that's good at that. So I think for anybody who's in the property management business, that might be something I would say to consider. If anybody was looking at it as, you could probably make a really good business being the turnaround person, and then finding someone you partner with longer term who has the scale, who has the infrastructure already built, and say, once it's stable, I'll give it to you and
get recurring revenue
and get
from
some
that
kind
or
of
something,
referral fee or something. Yeah.
There's a guy we know, actually, maybe we should get him on this podcast. He specializes in just the turnaround piece, right? So he comes in and does mostly like big institutional buildings, but he's the turnaround guy, and he has a whole crew, and they have contracts signed, and they do the turns for every single unit in the building. The manager manages, the turnaround guy does the turnaround. Wow. Yeah, it's that straightforward.
Yeah, they're very different skill sets.
Yeah,
and I think that was something I learned about myself too. I like that, like you said, I like a good sprint. I'm not a distance runner. Once it's up and running, I should probably get out of the way and go work on something else.
Yeah.
That's know thyself. That's good.
Yeah, it's know thyself, exactly. And that's good to know. And maybe, in the future, you'll figure that out. The exit strategy, maybe exit a little different way, depending on what you're building, and maybe there's a way to start building more recurring revenue or whatever that is. So, but anyway, so let's move on to property management.
That's the fun part about business.
Yeah, for sure. Always learning.
Always learning, yeah.
For me, and I don't, this is kind of, I think, you too, but like for me, it's always been do all these activities to acquire a bigger portfolio and like have a skill set. So that way I own a bunch of stuff long term, and then I can just like go away, where it's not even like, I didn't even assign value to my brokerage business until recently. I was just doing it to raise cash to go buy more buildings. I thought of, and I actually had managed I was managing 20 of mine and then like 10 of somebody else's. And I got the taste. And I was just like, whoa, this is, because again, the idea was if I manage a bunch of these, I know who's selling, you get to do more brokerage business, and or you get to buy them. And then you're just innately in tune to, this is what this is renting for. This is how difficult this is to rent. And now you're like just super dialed in on how to acquire property, right? So that to me was like always the initial thought. Do all this to acquire more assets, and then whatever happens to these other businesses, fine. I got all these real estate deals, but the reality is they're worth something when you put all this work into it. And I didn't even consider that until maybe a year and a half ago. So yeah.
And your business, obviously, like you said, your business is worth something. It's not just the monthly cash flow that you're getting in from it. It's that someone will assign a value to it ultimately that you can sell it. And, it is. I mean, our law firm is worth something. I don't know if it's 2x EBITDA or 3x or 1.5x or whatever it is. I don't hyper focus on that because I'm not thinking of exiting for 20 years. But it's when you build something, there's almost always someone that finds value in it.
That's one of the things that Adam, who we both know, real estate coach, or just general coach, business coach, kind of put in my head early on. It's like, hey, begin with the end in mind on some level, right? Like, hey, like this is a sellable thing. So when you're making decisions, think about it from that lens a little bit at least. So that way you make decisions that's building the value of this asset that you're pouring your life into. I mean, I work a bazillion hours a week, right? So might as well be worth something when it's done, right?
Agreed. So have an exit strategy.
Yeah. There's also, I think there's something for just the evolution of it, right? Like I think that all becomes the story you tell 20 years from now, right? Of how it evolved. I always love, in Warren Buffett's story that, Berkshire Hathaway was actually his worst investment. Yeah. Right. And that's how he ended up with the company being named that, because he got sort of stuck, and there's all kinds of fun lessons in that story about how he got kind of greedy and let his ego get in the way of the smart investing thing to do, that ended up landing him with owning a defunct company which was named Berkshire Hathaway.
I didn't know the backstory behind
Paper
that.
mill or
That's
something?
interesting.
Yeah, it was something like that, a
yeah.
paper mill or something.
Yeah.
And so that's how he ended up in the, one of his biggest learning lessons, how he ended up with the name. At that time, he probably thought it was, the worst thing that could possibly happen. We all know how that.
Now it's
evolved.
the most prestigious name in business
Right,
now. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So I think that's just part of the evolution, and you always. Business is sport for me. Like, I'm not a football or a basketball guy. I never really followed any sports, but to me, business is that. It's my sport, and so I like to look at all these different things. There's so much you can do, so many ways you can build businesses, and what are they worth, and cash flow, and the pros and cons, and operational challenges. To me, that's the fun part.
Well, we both like this too. That's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah,
is
great.
to have great guests like you on here so that we can learn and other people can learn from your story. But speaking of learning, so let's transition. So let's get to you mentioned that you did transactional, you're an agent.
Yep.
And then you built up a team underneath you over a period of 4 years, and
Yes.
got to be doing 130 plus deals a year?
Yep. So really, we built the team. In earnest over like a 2.5 year period.
Okay.
During that period of time, I got entirely out of production. Right. So my view is always, I love the real estate business, not as much the day-to-day of being a real estate agent, right? So I love lead generation. I love the systems and process. I love the consumer experience. I love the challenges of putting deals together, and all of the things that go with that. But go show somebody 10 houses, go sit down, at the kitchen table and walk through the listing presentation, not, my great love. And the lesson was, great, go find people who love that part.
Yeah.
And don't want to do the other things, right? That was the team building lesson when I had joined Keller Williams in 2020 there. And so that's where we set out. I had a really clear vision there that I knew what I wanted to do, what parts of the business I wanted to do. And I knew that there were people who could do the other parts way better than I could. And so we built a great team of people who did that.
What lessons learned? You and I have talked so much on this. What are your lessons from building a team? Why'd you stop, or why'd you?
Yeah. So for me, it's more of an, again, I think in terms of evolution instead of stop. What I found was there's a lot of great people who have their real estate license, who want to be successful real estate agents. It's a challenging business. It's the ultimate entrepreneur's business, right? Because
it really is.
You are doing sales, you are doing operations, you're doing customer service, you are doing marketing, you are doing technical issues. You've got all the client acquisition, client consultation. There's an element like attorneys. We can talk about. I think this part's going to become much, much bigger in the near future for real estate agents. Truly consultative. Kind of work in educating the consumer on the process. And you manage, 15 plus people who have to get involved in a transaction to get it to the finish line, right? And so it's such a challenging business. Everything we just listed out is a whole process unto itself. And so there's a lot of people who have a real estate license who are good at parts of those, but not good at the other parts. And just the nature of the real estate business is, you don't have some level of proficiency across that spectrum, you're going to have a really hard time being successful. And so that was my vision with the team was, let me find the best people for the different parts. Find the best person for the paperwork. Let me find the best person for working with buyers. Let me find the best person to hold open houses. Find the best person to, call potential sellers and put them all together. And figure out where they needed help and how I could connect the dots.
Did you build your team kind of like Larry has his, where you've got, yes, some of them are agents, some are also admins,
Yep.
and that there's different revenue splits, but it's not the traditional kind of like broker takes a piece of everyone, and each person has their own little silo that they're doing their own business, completely separate from everyone else.
Yes. So it was a little bit of
model.
It was a little bit of a hybrid. Right? We had most of the agents were generating their own business as well, using tools and marketing materials that we were providing to them.
Okay.
And then also we were doing additional lead generation and feeding that business to them.
Got it. And then you take a bigger split of that, I guess. Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan did a good job of removing himself from the business. Like that's where I reach out to Dan all the time and like, man,
What's the secret?
how did you do that?
Yeah.
Still trying to figure that out.
Well, the secret I think has to do with that sprint thing, and also like a willingness to let it be a mess, right? Like what the nature of building a team and delegating things is that it's always going to be messy, and the faster you just sort of get in there and let it become a mess and then fix it and then go, okay, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again, or how do we make it 20% better next time?
Yeah. You're never going to completely get rid of the mess.
Never.
It's whack-a-mole, and the moles just keep popping up. But you gotta, you sometimes perfect is unobtainable, or almost all the time perfect is unobtainable, and sometimes good is enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes good.
And good.
You can always try to reach for incredible. Like I like to tell our team, we're in the business of incredible client service, incredible customer service. I love that word, and that's what we're aiming for. But sometimes when I'm quiet, like on my own, and like thinking about, okay, the couple fires that I had to put out, am I going to make a stink about it, or was good enough in those situations?
I have to manage like my I don't know, call them like blow-ups, right? Like, I'm
sure.
like, I'm not going to
Your reactions.
I'm not going to react on this one. I'm just going to let this go.
Choose your battle.
I feel like I just reacted 4 times before that, and people are not going to want to work for me anymore if I keep doing that.
Yeah.
Well, and so much of it is mindset around how you look at that, right? I think that one of the greatest things is that like we're in real estate. There's not really a real estate emergency. Like no one dies. Right. So like, do things go not the way you wanted them to? Of course. Like, could you get upset about it? Sure. But
I've been on calls with you like, hey man, I'm all excited. And you're like, really, it's a tough day, man.
Yeah.
This shit happened.
Yeah.
Like when you were running the team. I remember.
It happens. And you got to kind of get that mindset to go like, all right, like we're just going to get back in. How do we fix it?
Yeah.
That's the entrepreneur's journey, right? Is like the willingness to every day pick it up and go, all right, let's do it again. Let's figure out how we make it better.
I was listening to something that like Alex Hermosi popped up on my thing, and he was talking about the game isn't to like become, say, the realtor. The game is to stay and be the realtor for the long time. The game is to stay in business.
Sure.
Right? Not start the business, stay in the business. Because the reality is as long as if you can stay in the business long enough and you're like somewhat, put together, you're gonna succeed at some point. It's just a matter of when do I get lucky? Do I get lucky year 1 and all of a sudden things to really start to work? Or is it, I'm a little less lucky, it's year 3. But as long as I last until year 3, the business worked.
Yeah. Well, there's a great, have you ever heard Simon Sinek talk about the infinite game?
There you go.
So this is the same sort of thing. So Simon Sinek is an amazing speaker, and anybody can search on YouTube, Simon Sinek, Sinek, infinite game. But he talks about that this is way over my pay grade, so we'll do the best we can. But in game theory, there's two types of games, basically. There's finite games and infinite games. So a finite game is like football, right? We agree on what the rules are. We agree on the start-stop time, and at the end, there's a winner, right? And an infinite game is there's constantly people constantly enter and exit the game, right? There's no defined start or stop time, and the game, to your point, Larry, is to stay in the game, right? And he talks about great instances, right, where these two types of mindsets around the game, go head to head. And so first he talks about in the Vietnam War, right, which is war by some default is an infinite game. But he talks about how the U.S. had a mindset in the Vietnam War that we were playing a finite game. Like this is going to end just like the previous one.
Well, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, we keep making, not to get into global politics again, but we keep making these same mistakes as a country over and over and over again.
So he highlights...
We're playing a finite game and an infinite game.
Yeah, and so and the same analogy carries over to everything in the Middle East, but we play a finite game. We're going to start the war, we're going to this is how we're going to keep score, and then it will end. And he said the problem is when a finite player is playing against playing an infinite game with an infinite player, the infinite player always wins because they're playing to survive. Mm-hmm. So he talks about, in the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong were fighting to live. So the game had to go on forever because the alternative is death.
Right. Yeah.
And so they will always win because their mindset is wake up every day and live another day. And the finite mindset is like, hey, we're losing the game. Yeah. Right. And so it plays against you. And then he talks about, takes it into the business world and talks about, Apple and Microsoft when it comes to MP3 players. Right. And at that time he was doing consulting work with both of them. Microsoft had the Zune MP3 player, which no one knows about anymore because of this reason. And Apple had, the iPod. And so he tells the story of going to meet with them, and Apple had this big conference that was all about the future of education and how technology played into that. And Microsoft, had their whole conference was all about the Zune and how it was technically better than the iPod in every way. It held more songs, it loaded faster, right? The battery life was longer. And so he goes and he's meeting with the executives at Apple, and he says, I just came from the Microsoft conference, and their Zune is really cool, and it's faster, and battery lasts longer and all these things. And he said the Apple executive looked at him and said, I'm sure it is. Right? Because their vision was an infinite game. They weren't playing to win MP3 players. They were playing to win technology. Right? Yeah.
And to Apple is it's a lifestyle. It's a part of their lives. Sure. Like, I still have a Samsung, and everyone I talk to looks down on me who has an Apple. Right. They literally see me as a lesser human being. Yep. Because I have, and I love my Samsung, and I think it's as good of technology, if not better than Apple.
It absolutely is.
But they look at me like they're the cool kids, and I'm a caveman, which is fine. And I make fun of myself about it. And my wife is Apple, and she makes fun of me. And it's all in good fun, but it is true. Yep. It is. And that's a long game.
And I think that's the mindset. And so I love Simon Sinek, a lot of his stuff, but that one always resonated with me, and it's sort of been my thing with all of the business. It's always an evolution. It's not like we lost the game. It's like, well, we get to play again tomorrow, and there's going to be new people who enter, and there's going to be people who exit, and we've all over the course of our professional business down here seen people in the real estate world, people enter and exit the real estate world constantly. Come and go. So you can't. If you become fixated on I'm playing against that person, one, you're ignoring people who are getting in the game. You don't know, and that person might not even be in the game a week from now.
I use it as temporary motivation. Like, it's like, sure, we're gonna remove this. Like, we're gonna become the best agent in this neighborhood, and the reality is if I just keep hammering away at it, it's just a matter of when.
Yeah, for some period, and for what period of time.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
An example in my world is on our landlord-tenant side, our evictions, we spend a decent amount of money on pay-per-click every month. And we're spending, $2,000 on average a month, and now we've actually bumped it up recently. We're expanding our SEO presence throughout Florida, spending a good amount of money on that. But we get a lot of our new business from the pay-per-click and some of our SEO optimization as well. But I'd say when we first started this about 10, 11 years ago doing the pay-per-click model, we were one of the only law firms that was advertising for eviction services and at $195 per eviction. And then it's funny, I went to court one day, and there was an attorney that I was doing an eviction for, and I was wondering why he was showing up with me. Well, not more than a couple months later, he had a website up for evictions, and he was doing $190 per eviction. And I got upset with my partner. I'm like, this guy, he's coming after us, and he's going to steal all our clients. And it was upsetting at the time. But long story short, number one, his price is no longer $190. Ours is still $195 because we've created that machine that we can do that. Yeah. And number two, so many players I watch. Every once in a while, I'll just do a search for eviction attorney near me on Google, and I'll see a bunch of competitors that are on there, but they come and go. Yep. And they come and go, and I'm playing the long game, and I'm here to play the long game, and their prices are always way higher than ours are, and we've just decided to have this low-cost Walmart model for our evictions, and it's worked, and it just continues to work, and we get other business from that we bring in, and it's a model that we created that's been successful. But I could play the finite game and be really upset and, attack my competitors and go after them. And I know another attorney in Florida that does that. He tries to bully people out of the market in landlord tenant law, and it doesn't work.
Right.
So I'm in it for the infinite game.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's okay. And then you know what? It makes me more happier and more peaceful and calmer.
Yeah, me too.
That's it. Like I now have had this law firm for 14 years, my partner and I, and I'm not saying I don't have bad days or I don't get upset at things, but it's a lot less than, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because I've taken on this new mindset, which you just explained.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so true and so relevant to the real estate business in particular.
For me too, it's it's managing marketing spend right now because I'm so aggressive about this.
Yep.
So I'm like, well, I got to make sure I don't just spend my way out of business.
Sure.
So that's a big thing we're focused on. It's okay, what do we really want to focus on, and let's plan to play this for the long term. Yeah.
And that's always a big part of the game too, right? Is how much time, what's your balance between working in and on the business, right? That's the entrepreneur's challenge.
Always,
right? And
I'm sure you coach around that all the time.
A lot of what I coach, and even for myself, I'm constantly trying to increase the amount that I'm working on the business, right? And create more blocks of time in my calendar to do that because it makes a big difference in how you do that.
And I've personally seen that I've lost business when I overdo it on the working on the business versus in the business. And so it's this balance. It's oh man, if I just was a little bit more attentive to said customer, could have got that one done. Yeah. But I was over here trying to shoot this YouTube video.
That's what that's what makes it makes it a sport, right? That's what makes it fun is where you're always going, okay, taking new feedback.
Playing offense for a while, then you're playing defense, and then you're back to offense.
And you take that data and that's one of the things I've always enjoyed, Larry, about our conversations is you're very attuned into all the different things that are going on and trying to run the calculation in your head of, how do I adjust and modify to maximize, and that's the game. That's the fun.
Maximize your ROI and maximize what you get per hour of your life. Yeah. That's really what we're doing here.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I love a lot is, and we have grown to love recently, is there are guys in this business, or girls, guys, whomever, people in this business that are experts at this one nuanced thing. And if you hunt that person down and you find them and you pay them exorbitant amounts of money to spend an hour or 4 hours or whatever amount of time with them to just understand this one thing, like Google My Business,
right,
or whatever. And I've walked into conversations with this, spending money, being I'm probably wasting money, but let's just go through this exercise. And we'll walk out, I'm this was profound. And then I execute on the actions, and it changes everything.
Sure.
So there's and especially in the real estate business, it's there's so many things that you can just dive deep into, be an expert, niche into one thing, and then that's your business, right?
And that's the key. That's a key in real estate business. But I think it's the same thing like we were talking about earlier with the investors, right? Which is everything works if you're willing to do what it takes. And I tell the agents that I'm coaching all the time, it's 2024. You can go on YouTube, whatever type of lead generation you think you're interested in, Google it. And there will be someone making $1 million a year doing it. That's the world we live in.
Door knocking,
you want to do door knocking. I know a guy who coaches door knocking, and it's amazing. Door knocking, right? Your sphere of influence, networking events, client parties, online pay-per-click, Google SEO, YouTube channel. There's someone being successful with all of them. The only question then is it right for you? And are you willing to do what it takes to get that level of success?
Are you committed? That's
are you going to commit?
First question, right?
Are you going to commit and do and do whatever it is? If you want success on YouTube, there's a formula to follow, and the only question is, will you do it?
And every time I go down that path of, okay, we're taking on this specific thing, we're going to handle it, I'll go down the path and I'll be I think I know the answer. I get it now. I get it. And then 2 weeks later, we continue to hammer on that topic, and it's I didn't get it 2 weeks ago at all. I thought I understood it entirely, didn't. Then I go meet with this next guy, and then I go find this next guru, and I'm I'll spend time. And my whole thing is some of my team's why are we spending money to go learn how to do this thing when we already know it and we already have our guru that we're following and it seems to work. Like, because I want to know everything about this topic.
Right.
Like, what's he saying to people that's different from him? And I want to have opinion when somebody asks me, or just personally, I want to know, like, why'd you go with X and why are you following this protocol versus some other guy? And I want to already know the answer. Like, yeah, he said he teaches this, but we tried this and this doesn't work, or this is why we're not doing this, right?
Yep.
And if you go with that like immense, intense curiosity into something, you're like, that's the thing, curiosity. Because it trumps like, oh, this makes business sense at some point. It's like, why are we spending $5,000 on this next program? We're already making money on this, right? It's because I want to know.
Yep. And I was telling, so a lot of what Larry's talking about, and we share a lot, is marketing, because we're in two different businesses, but we're really right now, both of us are honed in on SEO optimization and you know, growing lead generation and whatever types of marketing that are out there. But you know, I just had a call with the guy that we're probably going to hire yesterday, and we're trying to do a lot of these local SEO optimized pages in different areas of Florida. And I know Larry has some similar things he's trying to do. So we share some contacts and things that we're learning. But what the guy said on the call, which I liked, is he said, I've been doing this for years now. I've been in this game for 20 plus years. And he said, I have to be honest, you know, I would like to work with you as a client. Hopefully you want to work with me, but you have to come into this knowing that we're going to have to do some trial and error and experimentation. There's no one set formula, and anyone who tells you that there's a set script and formula for getting to number one on Google for whatever page you're putting together is a fool.
Yep.
And they're, you know, because they're constantly changing the algorithms on Google, and he's like, it's just a constant testing and tweaking. And so he's like, you know, well, I'll give you a price and we're going to set these pages up, and then you're going to come in, or we're going to be doing the editing and the tweaking over time for it. But we're going to put stuff out there as best we know possible based on all of our experience for doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
But it's always tweaking. And that just is my point, and not just in SEO optimization and Google marketing, but our businesses, it's constant tweaking. You constantly have to be tweaking something, a little this, a little here, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit, you know, it's like a recipe. There's no one recipe for making chili. You know, there's 10 million different chilies out there.
Exactly right. Yeah. That's the fun of it, and that's the challenge. And I agree with you, Larry. Like, the more you can go, if you come with a curiosity to it and you enjoy that aspect, and I find that just generally in the real estate business, the most successful people are all very curious. Like, they want to know what everyone's doing, and then you know, boil it down into something that you apply in your business, and it ends up being your own unique formula.
Yep.
And that's what sort of makes the horse race, right? Is whoever's tweaking and adjusting and constantly doing it over some period of time will either create a competitive advantage or not.
Yep. Yeah. Agreed. And I think that probably transitions pretty well into like why you ended up being a coach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's not skip over
we'll back up. So we'll back up. So we have to get there. So I had the team built. I had gotten myself completely out of production. I was, you know, in the office running the business of the team. And so I was at Keller Williams Innovations in Boynton Beach. And at the time, the owner and operator of that, Keller Williams is a franchise model of that franchise. We were having some meetings, getting to know each other better, and looking at some potential business opportunities. And she said to me, you know, you clearly love team building. You clearly love helping the agents on your team. You're active in teaching in our office and helping other agents. What do you think about taking what Keller Williams calls a team leader position, which is essentially you're running the office. You're responsible for growing the office. And initially I said no, but after some more conversation, I thought, you know what, maybe this is the next evolution, right? Is I do love helping agents and teaching them how to grow their business. And it was that those are all the parts of the business I loved. And these agents could go out and go be the people and, you know, front and center. And I'll tie it back to something I said earlier, which was, you know, when I left the corporate job, I didn't want to be a real estate agent. And that a couple years later, that ended up sort of haunting me, where I said, like, who do I think I am? I remember like having this, I was out for a run and like having this mental conversation and going like, who do I think I am that I'm too good to be a real estate agent when my mom and my aunt have been it, and like that paid my bills and I've got all these amazing memories, you know, and like that career provided for my family. And I think I'm, you know, a big shot and I can't be that. And so then I started to really think about, okay, well, why do you think like that, and really get more into it? And I realized, listen, the perception of real estate agents is not very good. across our society, right? We're seeing a lot of that. If we have time, I'd love to get into some of the stuff that's going on now with lawsuits and the Department of Justice, but it made me realize, like, okay, this industry needs to change. Like, I shouldn't be, thinking poorly of an industry that my family's been a part of. I should be like, why wouldn't I want to do that? So it sort of started me on this thought process of like, okay, well, how do we elevate the consumer perception of a real estate agent, a real estate business? How do we make this, an industry or a business that I would want to be a part of? And the team was like the first evolution of that. It was like, okay, I think I know how to do it on a one-to-one basis. How do I help 10 other people do it? The office became a bigger extension, right? It became, well, if you like to help these agents that are on your team, go help 100 in this office. And so that was the mission. We had a lot of success. So I was running that office for 2.5 years. Over that period of time, the office went from 110 agents to 230. I was one of the top recruiters in the state of Florida for Keller Williams.
Amazing.
That was 2 years ago, 2022. And it was a great run. I learned a tremendous amount about the brokerage business, right? Which is very different from the real estate agent business.
I see you're on your sprint once again.
Yes, right. Yeah,
From 100 some to doubling the number of agents.
Yeah. So
it was a DeMott sprint.
Yeah. So we recruited in that 2.5 year period. I recruited like in total 320 agents or something like that.
Amazing.
Huge.
And we got the office really nicely profitable and had a lot of growth there, and it built a great culture and great training and everything like that. And so I started to see it, right? It was like, okay, I've got these people together that I like working with, that I think represent the profession at a high level. I'm helping them grow their business. Like, we're having an impact. People are starting to, it sort of became that continuation of like, okay, consumers who are working with the agents at my brokerage are getting better service than the average, right? They're getting better results. We're getting higher sale price to list price ratios and better deals for our buyers and things like that. We can measure a lot of that quality of representation that agents get. And so again, I think probably there's an element of the sprint, right, that comes with it, but there was also an element of feeling like I wasn't getting to do. I knew what I needed to do to help more agents, and I couldn't do it because the brokerage business is very different than the real estate business, and helping, coaching, training, consulting agents is part of the brokerage business, but it's not the focus.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, the brokerage business is a volume business.
Your entrepreneurial endeavors were being kind of hampered, right?
Yeah. And it was sort of, it sort of just resonated with me. I was like, the success rate, we all know the success rate in the real estate profession is terrible, right? Like 87% of people who get their real estate license will be out of the business within 2 years. And even among the ones who keep their license, the top 10% is doing 90% of the business, right? And again, getting to know the people. There's good people who want to be and can be successful real estate agents, but they don't have the experience or the skill set or the knowledge to be able to figure out the marketing and the sales and the consumer experience and the whole thing, right? And so coaching and consulting all those agents and getting to meet with so many great agents and going, okay, this person's doing this and these things work. And I kind of started to build a model in my head of, here, these are the common denominators. If I could get more agents doing these things, they would be more successful, right? And I just couldn't implement it in that role. So it was the right time to step out of that and transition into my own coaching platform.
But being a team leader at Keller Williams is like huge in the sense of like education, and like it leveled you up, I'm sure, right?
100%.
Like big time.
I have people call me and ask me all the time, who are thinking about that opportunity. I would say it's akin to getting an MBA in the real estate business.
Yeah.
The rooms that I was in with some of the smartest people in the industry, and just learning to look at the real estate business differently from a different perspective, right? At the brokerage level, you're looking at market share, you're looking at results, you're looking at growth. How can we get more agents in? How can we bring them more value so that they want to come in and stay? And how can we help them get better results for their clients? So you're just managing it at a much different level than you are when you're at a team or an individual agent.
And I'm sure it's data driven too. Like,
Tremendously.
that because Keller Williams is so
Oh yeah.
buttoned up, but they're a corporate brokerage. They're
Biggest
national
brokerage?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are the biggest. They are the largest. So I don't know their current numbers. Everyone's numbers are sort of down more recently, but last I knew for sure they were 170,000 agents globally, which would make them the largest.
Yeah. So my phone system goes through a CRM.
Mm-hmm.
It calls, rings. Anybody who has my number, it goes through a CRM. So if you ring my CRM and I don't have your information, it doesn't show up, right? So like when a lot of people have X amount of people in their phone and they're not in their CRM, right?
Yes.
So, and they may be talking to them regularly. They don't even know they don't have their birthday, their email address, so on.
Mm-hmm.
So any phone number that comes in that rings that I don't have their number, I have to get their full name. Like I have to get their email address and I have to get their birthday and I have to know where they live. I literally am crazy about this. And my friends of mine are like, is this Larry? Like,
Right.
why are you asking me like back to back? Because like, as I see it happen, I add it in and I have to add it in because I can't not know who I'm talking to. My CRM doesn't even let me text message.
Right, if they're not in there.
Like a number, if they're
wow.
easily, we'll put it that way. It's a lot
Okay.
more effort to text
Got it.
a number that I'd have to remember or copy and paste it, all this nonsense. So like I got to save people on my phone or in my CRM. So like another way to think about that is delete all your numbers from your phone. And then every time somebody comes in, that's ridiculous. I get it. But that's like,
Well, and the reason you're maniacal about it is because you understand how much it's worth.
it's worth so much. And I would just say like the system that I've implemented to put the phone calls through the CRM is what's made it like forced me to do it. Because before that, 2 years ago, I didn't have it that way. And I was same as everybody else. Oh, this one maybe didn't jive perfectly.
Right.
Maybe I had some info, maybe I didn't. But now it's unstoppable.
Yeah.
So
Most people just getting their database in, and what ends up happening always when we go through this process, the first thing, once they come face to face with, okay, Dan's going to really make me actually contact these people. The first thing they always go is, well, I haven't talked to them in years. Guess what? We're going to start today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
have a lot of reunions.
right.
Yes.
The second thing that usually happens is they'll get a piece of business almost immediately. Someone will go, oh, I know someone who's thinking about it because everyone's thinking about or talking about real estate right now.
of
Right. And then the third thing that ends up happening is they find out how many deals they missed.
yes, that's a
Right?
huge
Yeah.
thing. Huge.
From the last 5 years of doing
Yep.
nothing.
'Cause they-
sitting on their hands.
Right. Because you go, and then if I can
Extrapolate that.
if I can get someone to
Say,
go
how many phone calls did you make? Okay, you made 100 phone calls and you got 2 deals out of this. Imagine if you had been doing 100 phone calls a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And if I can get, those 2 revelations out of someone, then I know I can get them to stick with the program and they're gonna go on to be successful, because then you realize the whole concept of leads is ridiculous, right? Leads are people's contact information. There's no inherent value in them beyond that. It is a way to have a conversation with someone. In an idealized world, we believe that the leads are closer in time to transacting, but anybody who buys leads at scales knows that's also not true.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, you're buying a phone book, right? Through whatever strategy you choose to do that. And if you don't have a system in place to nurture those relationships until they inevitably come to fruition, you're just wasting your money.
You have to be playing the long-term game if you're buying leads. You have to be playing the year, 2 year out.
And my
Because
point,
someone else is going to get that person. So meaning
That's right.
you may have the conversation now, whether you buy it from Zillow or it's in your phone book, and you have the conversation with them, great. And they say, yeah, I think it's that. I'm kind of interested. Why don't you send? I'm thinking of buying something in Boynton, but I don't know if it's right now, but maybe in the next year or so.
Right.
Great. Okay, you send them some comps in Boynton and let me know if you want to look. And then they don't reply back and they don't respond.
Right.
Well, 7 months from now, when it's time for them to actually buy, they forget that conversation that
100%.
they had with you 7 months ago, and they just had a conversation a week ago with their cousin
Yep.
but if you had been working them this whole time, they would have told their cousin, I'm sorry, I already have someone that's been working with
Right.
me and I feel guilty. Like I would would love to throw you business, but
Right.
they
Yeah.
put a lot of work into this.
of course, the other thing people undervalue when it comes to leads and their own database is the network effect, right? The 6 degrees of separation. Okay, you have 600 people in your database, but each of them has 600 people.
Yeah.
And if you do a good job of showing up and bringing some kind of value and creating this balance in real estate, we have this really unique challenge as opposed to a lot of other sales industries where the the sales cycle is so long, right? And not only just the transactional component, which is 30 to 90 days, but I look at it from the lifespan of the average person buys or sells a house every 7 years ish. So you have a 7-year life cycle. How do you stay relevant with someone over 7 years? You can't just talk about real estate every time. You have to build some kind of other relationship with people, at least on a human to human level of, well, I know Jerron's a good person. And so even though I don't need anything right now, I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. But once you turn that mindset around and go, oh, that's actually a huge benefit for us. I can send an email to my database about anything. Last week, we sent an email about Super Bowl commercials. It has nothing to do with real estate. It has everything to do about connecting about which is your favorite Super Bowl commercial. And over 7 years of us getting ways we can connect with people and also demonstrating that we have real estate knowledge.
We're credible.
And we're credible.
This is what I was going to say.
I'm a resource for you. Then it becomes an inevitable, to your point, Jerron, of that person would never talk to random stranger or whatever. They're going to go, I know Larry, I know what he's into. Mm-hmm. We connected about Dunkin' Donuts. And also I see all of his success and he's taught me a lot about the real estate industry over the past 5 years.
I've had a conversation recently. I'm selling a friend's house here, or will be in a couple months. And she was asking me, she's like, hey, so I have this second cousin up in the area where I'm moving to. And man, I don't know if I can trust that second cousin with this transaction, mm-hmm. right? And she's like, how bad is it if I just go work with someone else? I'm like, I'm happy to refer you. And she was, I asked me honestly, I'm like, he might be a little upset, She's like, would you be upset? And I'm like, well, here's what I do. And I just gave her this speech. I'm like, I try to make it super easy for all my network to decide to work with me because what I do on a regular basis is hit them with, I'm super credible, selling 125 homes a year, did 80 million in sales volume. By the way, check out my Google reviews, 300 plus Google reviews, 300 plus Zillow reviews. I got 30 active listings. Like, dude, I'm the number one agent in Boca. Like, that's the reality of it. So it's easy for you to be like, I'm Larry's friend, but also, by the way, he's the best.
Right.
So he's literally the best, and I can prove it by doing all these things. And I was telling my fiance the same thing. Like, our network, you could do more business if you just had more digital credibility. Yes. I had someone reach out to me the other day. I'm like, yeah, I know she's our friend, whatever, but I looked her up. I don't see a whole bunch of reviews. I'm like, you got to get on that, right? So make it easy for your network to Absolutely. Be able to choose you.
And there's one other aspect to it too, which is people seeing your humanity and who you are. Yeah. A couple examples of that. One is like my wife. She's a loan officer and she's a mortgage broker. She does mortgages. Invariably, when she's able to add someone like a realtor or someone that can be a referral source to her, when they get her on Instagram and they get to see kind of the stuff that we do on me and her and just doing social events, being with her mother and whatever it is. Almost always there's a deal that flows from that.
Of course.
And they just get to see her as a different person because they only get to see her. Maybe I introduce her to someone and we sit down at a formal lunch and okay, great, you break bread. That's sometimes that works and that helps. But when someone gets to see your life in that Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is that you use, that's really important. And then another thing, just for Larry and I, these podcasts, just in the last few months, we've started doing this and there's been a lot of clients that have come to us, me and Larry individually, separately. Sometimes they're my clients that are coming to Larry and vice versa. And it's great. And people know me from my phone calls. They know me from my name on the logo of the law firm and on eviction paperwork or on closings. But a lot of times, in fact, the great majority of times, they never get to meet me because they're busy or I'm not at that closing personally, my closer is, or I'm not at that court hearing that they go to. But they get to see me in a video and they get to see, okay, this is actually the Jerron Kelley that I send business to and I've been using for 5 years now or whatever it is. And it's also loyalty too. It creates and keeps loyalty, and Larry has experienced this.
Well, it creates it creates real relationships, right? The amazing power of the world we live in today is that relationships, in a formulaic sense, right, are about trust, in my opinion, and trust is strictly a factor of time, right? like you said, you can meet someone and have dinner and go, okay, like, that was a normal experience and I enjoyed the conversation. But you can't develop trust unless you have time together. The unbelievable thing about the world we live in today is that you can post something on the internet and it creates time at scale, right?
Yes.
So I do a lot on Instagram, and I, do 1 minute to, 90-second reels where I'll talk about something in the real estate space. And then I'll go back and look at it and see, the total watch time is 5 hours.
Yeah.
When you think about the magnitude of 5 hours that someone spent face to face via, that virtual device listening to me, we're building trust.
Yeah, for sure. And think about how many coffees or lunches you would have to do to get that from doing one video or a short or a podcast. One other quick example I have from the opposite side, where a lot of times in the evenings when I'm, before bed, like an hour or two, I'll have dinner, eat on the couch sometimes or whatever. I watch YouTube a lot, and I watch a lot of real estate things, business content, a little bit of politics, history, current events. Yep. One of the guys I follow a lot is Patrick Bet-David.
Yep, sure.
Great guy, awesome. He moved to South Florida here in the last couple of years. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I guess it was, maybe time flying, maybe two and a half years ago now, he was renting because he had just moved to Florida in Boca, and I ran into him at a restaurant. I was there with my wife and a realtor. I was actually having lunch with them. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Patrick Bet-David over there. And he was already popular, but it was before he really, really exploded.
Yeah.
But anyways, I got up to leave, and he was leaving at the same time, and he was getting in his truck. And I said, Patrick. And he said, yeah. And I said, hey, big fan, watch your podcast all the time. And we talked a little bit about it. He has a co-host, Adam, who is a bit of a character. So I was making some jokes about it. And the next day on the podcast, he actually made a comment about me coming over and making the joke about Adam, and he was busting his chops. And then I ran into him at another restaurant that same week, and he came over to my table and said hi. The point, though, in me saying this is that when I met him, I had to hold back because I almost felt that he was a friend. He had never met me before,
sure.
But because I had watched hours and hours and hours of his podcasts, I almost like imagine myself as like having an old fashioned and a cigar with him, like that he's like an old buddy, because I know how he thinks. We think a lot about the same things. He's a businessman. Like, I like the content that he puts together, and I almost saw him as like a virtual friend. And I have to stop myself. I have to be like, that's really creepy. This guy, like, he met me for the first time, and so I had to kind of like hold back on gushing and being like, hey, dude, will you be my friend?
It's an amazing opportunity. I think we were talking about this with John right before you walked in, Jerron, which is like, now this is the way people are getting together now. And the cool thing is the three of us would have gone out. 10 years ago, the three of us would have gone out for a nice dinner and had this same conversation. Sure. And now the fourth party is, the camera and whoever is watching and joining with us. And it's such a fun thing to go, let's get together and cut it up for a little bit, we would have done anyways, but
just have a little bit of an audience,
right? And let other people get to watch it, and you do build that relationship with people, and people feel that way, which is at the end of the day, all marketing is about.
It's the magic of social media, and that's what you're doing. And circling all the way back, that's what you're coaching your clients on and your realtors on, which is amazing.
Yeah, and in today's world, it just has to be, in the real estate space especially, the world is just a noisy place, right? There is podcasts, there's YouTube, there is social media, there's videos, there's posts, there's LinkedIn, there's
a lot of content.
It's such a noisy place. You have to increase the frequency of communication, and you have to diversify the methods, because you want to get in front of as many people as you possibly can for any amount of time on whatever method of communication they're open to accepting it.
Yeah. And so for us, it's like building a system that gets that content created and out the door as fast as possible, with as minimal amount of time from me, so I can keep doing what I do, which is sell real estate and having those conversations with clients. So you're providing a service that's kind of, helping your team, your people do that.
Yeah. The magic, the other part I think that comes with this, right, is just the efficiency with ChatGPT and tools like Canva and all the automation and stuff. It's more and more possible for the average real estate agent who is, when I say average, I mean individual real estate agent who's
single agent.
Single agent who's going to help, a dozen to 24 people buy or sell a house. It's possible for them to execute these strategies. Maybe not to the same extent of what you guys have set up here, but a mini version, right?
It's step one. It's step one. Like,
always.
this is where I started, right?
Everyone starts somewhere.
Yeah, you knock that out, and then you decide where you want to go with your business, right?
Yep.
And then they can talk to you about that. You've built teams, you've done all these things, but first do the fundamentals, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Always.
So people watching in the audience who, let's say, they're realtors, how can you help them? What what's kind of the next step? What would be good people for you to connect with?
Yeah. So anyone who's in the real estate industry, regardless of your level of experience, I love talking to real estate agents, and I learn, like I said, as much as I try to help. My website, dandemott.com, is a great resource. I have a ton of things. I'm constantly giving away free resources on there. Yep. I have a YouTube channel that we just launched this year, which is at Dan DeMott. And on Instagram is my primary platform, but I do a lot on Facebook as well. And like I said, my on all of that communication, it's always about providing as much information and free value as I possibly can. And like I said, that I don't gatekeep any of the knowledge or any of the systems or process. I will give it all away. But if you want somebody wants assistance in execution and compressing the time it will take them to get the results from those strategies, then that's the best way for us to work.
You're
together.
the guy.
Yep.
Cool.
Awesome. Anything else to add that you?
No, this has been a great conversation.
Super fun. Always. It's a shame we don't do it a lot more often, but it's always amazing when we get together, Dan and Larry. We're great. I don't know if I would say great minds think alike, but at least you two guys think alike. 2 great minds.
3 great minds. We'll give you that. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining the Real Deal Investing Podcast. We'll put all the contact information for Dan and all of us in the description below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're interested in more content just like this. See you guys on the next one.